Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Trusted Trustee podcast. And as usual, I'm joined by Tracey Besters. How are you, Tracey? Great to see you. Thank you for putting together another podcast with me.
Darin, I'm doing really well. Thank you very much. And it's exciting that this is episode number 3. Gosh, this time is going quickly. We're already at 3 episodes, so that's exciting.
The body of work builds quickly, doesn't it? And of course, we do have a very valued sponsor with us on these podcasts. And so this podcast is sponsored by Super Fund Property Valuations, ATO compliance in a click. If your SMSF accountant or auditor is on your back for a property valuation, and let's face it, that's a pretty common thing, just order an affordable report from the experts with ease today with the details you can see on your screen now. And as I keep saying, when I acknowledge the great support of Super Fund Property Valuations, of how important property valuations are and how in the gun they are with ASIC, and of course, as an extension, the auditing community. So a great service there, and I couldn't imagine that would be anything but useful for SMSF trustees. So well done, and thank you again for your support, Super Fund Property Valuations. But we are actually going to continue our discussion as to how to get money out of super. And of course, we've gone through some of the more conventional ways in our first 2 episodes. So we covered off, the standard sort of pension procedures that a lot of people use to draw down their super savings. And of course, last time around, we spoke more about the transition to retirement income stream, or TRIS, as the industry likes to refer to them as. So, and during that discussion, we kind of touched on another avenue that you can use to access your superannuation benefits. And we saw a little bit of this probably coming up more on people's radars during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the government allowed people to access their super, was it $20,000 of super, early, to try and bridge any financial gap that they needed to bridge. So obviously that came under the definition of financial hardship caused by the pandemic, of people, obviously not being able to work in a normal fashion like they used to be able to. So some people might actually be a little bit familiar with these sorts of provisions, but that was very specific to COVID-19. But there are wider financial hardship provisions in the law that will allow you, in certain circumstances, to take money out of your super to meet some of those sort of expenses. So Tracey, what are some of the details we're looking at there?
Yeah, thanks, Darin. And I think just to take one step back, Darin, before I jump into that, I think that it's really important to remind ourselves that when we're dealing with anything to do with superannuation and retirement funds, then we have to go back to the purpose of what those superannuation accounts and superannuation funds are for, don't we? So we have to remind ourselves that we have this thing called the sole purpose test. And the sole purpose test is the objective of our superannuation, in the sense of the sole purpose of having a superannuation account is to provide for retirement benefits, which is our traditional pathway or our standard pathway of accessing super benefits. However, there is then the ancillary benefits and the ancillary reasons that we can have our superannuation funds for. And one of those, of course, is provision of death benefits to our loved ones when we pass. But the other part is then these other financial hardship grounds or compassionate grounds that we can access super. And you're absolutely right. During COVID, we saw a whole cohort of people that were able to access the money from their super. Some of it, I think, was for less than legitimate purposes. I did hear stories about people who did take money out of super under COVID and bought cars. Not quite sure how that was, financial hardship. But anyway, that's a whole other story. We won't go into war stories about COVID access.
I heard big TVs from Harvey Norman, actually.
Right. the end of June sales and COVID financial
Yeah.
hardship releases. Yeah. So look, there's always going to be people that try and skirt the rules, right? I think that's unfortunately some aspects of human nature. But when we start to think about, severe financial hardship and being able to access super for those reasons, I think that is a really beneficial and legitimate purpose to be able to do so. And I think that if you've got this pool of money there for your retirement, but you can't survive until retirement because of severe financial hardship that is most of the time completely outside of our control, completely outside of the members' control, then I think it is a very valid reason to be able to take money out of super. Now, it's not just as simple as saying, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing severe financial hardship. Please, can I take my money out of super? There's a whole lot of rules and a whole lot of parameters that we need to be looking at and we need to be following. And the first thing is, are you eligible, really? And the eligibility starts at preservation age. It's that thing that we keep talking about being preservation age. So preservation age, as we know from 1 July 2024, is age 60. So when we actually look at financial hardship, it's looking at, are you preservation age less 39 weeks? Or are you preservation age plus 39 weeks? And depending on which one of those two things you fit into, will then determine, one, how much you can take, but also to what other parameters you need to satisfy before you can take money. So in a nutshell, because we're not going to go through all of the technical legislative part of this, in a nutshell, if your preservation age, above preservation age 39 weeks, then there's no limit on the amount of money you can take out of super under financial hardship provisions, but you do need to show that you are in financial hardship.
Yeah.
And financial hardship has a whole definition in itself, but it's effectively that you cannot survive on your own means. You can't survive on your own means. So it's not that you just don't have enough money to go on that holiday this week. It's not those sorts of things. It is like severe financial hardship. It's not something to play around with, but if you think about now preservation age 60, it kind of changes my thought process a little bit about this financial hardship. Not that you can't take money out under a financial hardship provision, but if you've met preservation age at age 60 and you think about what the retirement looks like at age 60, then you only have to leave a position of gainful employment, but you can go back to work. So you may actually be better off, rather than taking money out under financial hardship provisions, you may be able to meet the standard traditional pathway of retirement before accessing superannuation under financial hardship. Because one of the requirements under severe financial hardship is that you're not gainfully employed over preservation age. So if you're not gainfully employed over preservation age and you have ceased that gainful employment over preservation age, you've actually already met the conditional release potentially for accessing a standard account-based pension or lump sum withdrawal. So that might be better, you know what I mean? That might be easier, more straightforward and better. If you're below preservation age, though, then there are a whole lot of other requirements as to how long you've been on Centrelink benefits, have you applied for those Centrelink benefits, and then if you can meet all of that eligibility, then you can take up to $10,000 per annum from superannuation, and that's it. So is that enough to help you get through financial hardship provisions? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it may not be enough, but I'm sure it would probably help.
For sure, for sure.
Is there any like categories of expenses that you have to prove that, look, I'm struggling to pay my whatever it might be, mortgage, electricity bill, water rates, those essential.
Correct.
I can't go down to Harvey Norman to get my,
Get my TV.
72-inch plasma TV.
Yeah.
But is there a raft of things that you actually have to say that, look, these are actually the living expenses that I need to meet, and I just can't do that right now?
There are, Darin, absolutely. And the ATO have a really good list, a comprehensive list on their website. So that's a great resource for our trusted trustees to look at. But the broad range of those expenses are that you cannot afford to keep your home.
Yeah, right.
You can't, you can't meet your mortgage payments. You can't pay your rent. You cannot actually keep yourself in a housing environment, or you can't pay the utilities on that house. So it's kind of, it's dire straight situations. It's not as simple as saying, well, I'm a bit short this week. I'm a bit short this week because I've done X, Y, and Z. My afterpay payments are coming through this week and I need to, you know, pay off those shoes and those handbags and that TV that I bought. It's not like that. It is, you know, think about the terminology severe financial hardship.
Yeah.
But to look at the specifics of the expenses, the ATO guide on severe financial hardship is a great resource to go to.
Yeah, and of course that makes perfect sense. I don't want people to be accessing their super willy-nilly for, you know, discretionary spending or anything like that. Obviously, it's not what it's designed for. And of course, it's not. Well, it might be appropriate to use the term robbing Peter to pay Paul here, because you're literally taking money out of your retirement savings, but at the back end of it, how much is that actually going to penalize you in later life, is certainly a consideration that must be taken into account when looking to apply for these things.
Yeah, absolutely, Darin. And I think that's, you know, certainly when you have a look at the ATO resource on this, there is kind of, I think it might be even in the first paragraph of that page, the ATO basically say, now just remember, if you take $10,000 out of your superannuation account now, you're not going to have that compounded earnings on that $10,000 for retirement. So you are taking your own money early on in the piece. It's not somebody else's money. It's your money that you're taking. So if you take it now, you know, that whole kind of instant gratification time now, which, you know, if you're under severe financial hardship, it's a very legitimate way of being able to get through that massive curveball of your life, then you aren't going to have that money later. And, you know, ideally you are able to make up ground and put more money back into superannuation to you know, top that back up or over and above that. But, you know, things happen, Darin, don't they? And, you know, we don't always have this, well, we don't have a crystal ball, but we don't always have this perfect linear life where everything goes to plan and we don't experience, you know, curveballs in our life.
Yeah, of course. And of course, we just talked about severe financial hardship, but there is also another avenue to deal with medical expenses. You just mentioned that you don't do things willy-nilly. Well, unfortunately, this kind of area has got a little bit loose recently. It is legitimate, but I think it's got a little bit loose. So we could be in for a little bit of a tightening around this measure. But just talk us through what those, you know, if you've got medical expenses that you need to meet, again, that's seen as an essential health exercise, I suppose you can say, for your own well-being, that the ATO and the government is sympathetic towards you being able to fund that, so that obviously they don't want you to die or have your life in peril. So that's probably where these provisions sort of come from.
Yeah, exactly, Darin. And again, another really legitimate way of being able to help yourself when if there is a curveball. And, you know, I've just had a recent health scare myself that totally came out unexpected, and thankfully I'm fine, but you don't know when things are going to happen in your life. And so there is another way of accessing superannuation benefits under what's called compassionate grounds. And one of those compassionate ground situations is where you need to get medical help. So you can access your super if you need to pay for, or you have already paid for, you've borrowed money to pay for some sort of medical treatment, and you want to repay that borrowing. So you've either already paid for it or you're going to pay for it. And medical help is quite a loose term, or medical services is quite a loose term in some respects, because the conditions are that that it's really anything that is going to help you if you have something that's life-threatening or chronic pain or some sort of chronic illness, then you can access your superannuation to pay for that. So there have been, and alluding to back to what you alluded to about, you know, will there be some tightening in this area? We're seeing a lot of advertising, and I'm seeing it particularly around dental services. So we're seeing advertising from the providers of these medical services telling people that they can access these services using their superannuation. So we're seeing quite a lot of, well, I'm seeing from time to time all of these advertising. And I think that's where it can be, you can then start to think, well, are we overstepping that, boundary of what the government intended for this sort of, access? And are we actually seeing that commercialized a bit too much?
Well, I think we definitely are, Tracey. I mean, in our last podcast, I think you did mention the situation where someone withdrew money to have dental surgery or dental work done, and then they decided they didn't need to have it done. And can they just keep the money, or do they have to put it back into super? Well, I'd almost suggest that if you can change your mind on a whim like that, then potentially was the dental work originally earmarked for this drawdown? Was it really essential? I mean, was it really? I'm not suggesting it's got to be life-threatening, but it's certainly got to be detrimental to your health, whereby you use this resort as a way to fund it. Now, that's a really bad development that you're hearing advertisements. I must admit, I haven't seen any of those promos, but I don't doubt that there are. And of course, nobody should be encouraged to manipulate the system in order to do something like this, because it's not what the superannuation system was designed for. And yeah, I actually think it's really good that we've got safety nets in there where compassionate grounds is an aspect built into the system. So, you're not faced with a ridiculous situation of, but I've got money sitting there, but I can't pay for anything, and I'm going to die, or I'm going to be severely impacted if I can't pay for this stuff. But encouraging people to say that, oh, you can have this dental, you can just get your super to pay for it. And I would suggest that that's even going to accelerate the tightening of these rules as well, because once the ATO gets wind of that sort of promotion going on, a little bit like encouraging people to either establish an SMSF, roll over their funds into an SMSF so they can invest into a property development, or take out an LRBA to invest into a property. And we all know that that's happened. We've seen that happen, and we've also seen the ATO's crack down on it. So the SMSF Association actually supplied some statistics around that in the last magazine that I did. Dental work, specifically dental work, that's gone from $66.4 million in 2018-19 to $313 million released from super in 22-23.
There you go.
So that's pretty significant. And the other area that seems to be being manipulated at the moment, that I use the term manipulated, maybe it's not really accurate to say manipulated, but certainly seeing a trend like that is weight loss procedures. Yeah. So in that whole range, again, that's gone from $207 million to $249 million. So once it starts to trend in that direction, you have to start to question whether or not, or not me, but I'm sure the regulators and the powers that be will actually start to question, well, hang on a minute, that seems like a fairly significant trend. They can't all be having bad teeth. I know that we're trying to cut down on our sugar intake and whatever, but they can't all have bad teeth enough to have encouraged that kind of quantum leap in the monies released from super to pay for their dental work.
Exactly, Darin. And I think, I think there's a bit of a fine line, really, because part of what drives me in this space is to help educate people on what is possible, and to help people to build their knowledge so that they can make informed choices and they can understand the realm that we are in day to day, which is what you can do inside superannuation, what you can't. So I am all for people knowing what's possible, and all for people knowing that, there is this ability to access superannuation on compassionate grounds. So that's one side of the equation, right? And then the other side, and how big is that gap in the middle? The other side is, when does it become abused? Like, when do we actually find that people are being preyed upon, that they can have, you know, these procedures done, and provide, if the procedure's all legitimate, you know, all for it, 100%, I have no problems with it whatsoever. But, you know, that is such a big increase in dental procedures, completely, isn't it, between what, 2019 and 2022 or 2023? That's a massive increase. So is it that we've done our job really well, Darin, and we've educated enough people so that they just know about it? Or is there other things going on? And you know, it's not, again, it's not as simple as just ticking a box to say, I want to access my super for a medical procedure. You have to go through the steps. You actually have to have two medical doctors, one who's a specialist in that field, and then one who is another medical practitioner, to say that you have to, this procedure is going to improve your life. You have a chronic illness in this regard, and this procedure and this treatment plan is actually going to improve your life. It's going to fix this chronic problem. And, you know, and Medicare can't pay for it. So it's got to be something that's not covered by Medicare. You've got to have an entire treatment program put together. You've got to have all of the quotes put together, or you've got proof of the invoices. There's a whole lot of things that you have to, there's a whole lot of things you've got to jump through. So I would hate to think that people are just going into it lightly and, you know, just willy-nilly going, oh, wow, I can do this. I can, you know, get this done. I know legitimately people who have used that for dental procedures, and it has, in fact, improved and changed their lives. So I think that that's legit. And maybe it's that people are just finding out about it now. Maybe that's why we're seeing such an influx. But and that's what I hope that's the reason. So we can do, but weight loss programs as well. I have seen some, not as much advertising around, I've seen more advertising around dental than I have around weight loss, but certainly there was a run of adverts on Facebook, particularly around dental services and paying for it by your super.
Well, it gets back to back to the message that you started with today, and that was around the sole purpose test of, I mean, that's got to dictate everything that you do in your super fund, but also with the education of allowing trustees to know what is possible to do within their own superannuation fund. What is possible doesn't mean that you got to do it.
No, 100%.
You know,
100%.
To get off topic a little bit, I've been to presentations recently where people are pretty obsessed with unit structures to invest in property, obviously, to be able to garner enough capital to make the project work. And they seem to be obsessed with, and this is a topic for another day, but they seem to be obsessed with, oh, it's all right, Tracey. I've looked at all the regulations, and you know, I've made sure that I'm not in breach of any in-house asset rules or any related party rules, and that's fantastic. So green light, I can go ahead and do it. But probably the one thing potentially they might be ignoring is the fact that, okay, so you've ticked all those boxes, and that's fantastic that you want to be complying and that sort of thing. But have you actually asked yourself the question, should you do it?
Yeah.
Like, is the investment any good? You know, are you going to make money out of it? Again, looking at the sole purpose test to say that, how is that going to better my retirement savings when I get to the end? Like it's got to be a prudent investment. It's great to tick compliance boxes, and that's important. I'm not suggesting that anybody should ignore compliance considerations, but getting back to your point, knowing that something is possible doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it.
Exactly, Darin, exactly. And, you know, so many times when I've been asked, can I do this in my super fund? I'll say, well, it's possible, but should you do it? That's, you know, that's a whole different ball game, because
100%.
it's not a one size fits all for everybody, right?
No.
So what might be beneficial to me now and in the future is not beneficial to you. We both could do it, but, you know, that doesn't mean that we should do it. And I think that sometimes as educators and presenters and people in the space that like to talk about the latest and greatest, we can be very excited about what's the latest and greatest. And the message of what you can do doesn't always filter down to our trusted trustees around, is that something that is manageable for them? Just
Yeah.
because you can do
Yeah.
something doesn't mean that it's going to become it could become so overly complex
Yeah.
that it's might be okay right now, but the ongoing management and looking after that particular structure or that particular strategy might be too cumbersome.
Yeah, you're 100% right. 100% right about that. And of course, we're going to wrap up today with the final measure, which actually probably garnered quite a bit of coverage when it was first announced, but I don't actually think any of the ATO statistics has proven this to be a very popular measure. And that is, of course, and this is a mouthful in itself again, first home saver super scheme, which is where you've got some money that's ring fenced that you can actually access to put a deposit down on your first home. So that's another avenue to access again, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Darin. And on top of that, and we'll come to our fizzes, but but
I
just
couldn't manage that, not like Trish. So that was too hard to
we'll come to that in 2 seconds. But just to mention that financial hardship, compassionate grounds, two major ones. We can also access superannuation for temporary incapacity. So that's where we actually can't work for a period of time because we're temporarily incapacitated. So there is, and that's generally accessing super, and that's funded by some form of insurance, income protection insurance that sits inside of our super fund. So just to mention that one, and permanent incapacity is the other one as well. So permanent incapacity, much easier to meet, much easier to fund. Temporary incapacity is only an income stream for the period that you are temporarily incapacitated. And that's kind of like, if you think about having income protection, and I'm not a fan of actually having income protection funded by our self-managed super funds or having that policy inside of the self-managed super fund, because I think there are a number of hurdles getting money out.
Yeah.
So you may have a waiting period inside of the insurance policy might have a waiting period of say 30 days, but what are you going to do in the meantime? How are you going to fund that in the meantime? And will you be able to meet that condition of release? So that's just to mention those two. And then the FISS, the First Home Saver Super Scheme. That's an acronym in itself, isn't it? So yeah, that kind of it sounded really exciting, and it was kind of like, oh well, this is like breaking ground, this is so exciting, this measure. But yeah, it hasn't really taken off that much, has it? Like
No, not at all.
Again, something that we in the industry are all excited about, but when you actually filter it down to should you do it, and is it something that's possible at the coalface? Well, I haven't seen too much uptake. So what that is that you can choose to make voluntary contributions to super. So it's over and above your normal superannuation guarantee. You can't use the superannuation guarantee. It has to be based out of voluntary contributions. You're right, you ring fence those voluntary contributions, and then you can withdraw for a deposit for your first home up to $15,000 per annum or up to $50,000 total. Now, property prices have probably been one of the reasons why this First Home Saver Super Scheme hasn't been that successful in its actual practical application, because we've just seen such a huge increase in property prices. So the deposit to get $15,000 up to $50,000 out of your money that you've put in to super on a property in Sydney. I mean, average deposit on a house in Sydney is far, far greater than that.
You couldn't do it in Sydney. You couldn't do it.
And even some of the regional areas, like where I'm in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, and even property prices here, you wouldn't be able to do that. So I think I think it's the right measure in some respects. Like it is a measure, but what's the point if you can't use it?
Well, it's like the sentiment behind it, I think the motivation behind it is good.
Yeah.
Obviously everybody's looking for a solution to the housing crisis and to allow people to enter the property market more easily. I mean, the amount is problematic, obviously, in the largest cities, let alone the largest states. As you mentioned, you're in the Southern Highlands, and it's going to be an issue down there. I'm based in Sydney, and there is no way that is going to make a dent on anybody who is trying to enter the property market for the first time to try and buy their home. And then, of course, you've got the situation where you're trying to balance it out because they don't want you to be able to take too much money out of your super fund, because as I said, it's a little bit like the situation before where you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that you get the instant sugar hit now that's going to penalise you at the back end, whereby your superannuation may not be adequate to fund your retirement because you've made these withdrawals along the way and you haven't had that compounding effect of your portfolio returns. But also, I suppose the people that this is pitched to, they're a little bit hamstrung as to how they can participate as well, because if you're thinking of the people who are looking to buy their first home, they're probably not at the peak capacity of their earning power yet.
Yeah.
So you're talking about people who are relatively still in the first stages, I suppose you could say, or first stages trending towards middle stages of being in the employment, arena. Who's got spare cash to put away on top of their SG to be able to participate in this scheme? So there's a couple of sort of grey areas where, and I don't envy the government. I have no solutions, but they're probably some of the elements that are restricting people from being able to take advantage of this.
Yeah, I agree, Darin. And I think it comes back to that whole conversation about, yes, you've got this measure that is possible. Should you do it is a completely different situation. And the complexity around the First Home Saver Super Scheme, I think, is what also rules it out as well. Because let's just say that, yes, you've got the ability to take up to $50,000 out of the money that you've already put there. So you've got to make the choice, yes, rather than me putting my deposit savings into a normal bank account outside of super and earning money on that, I'm going to make a voluntary contribution, concessional contribution into super, or non-concessional contribution into super. I'm going to then look at pulling that back out, plus the associated earnings. So yeah, you can take the associated earnings that have been earned on that money as well. But geez, there'd have to be a big amount of associated earnings to make it worthwhile, as opposed to having it invested outside. So, and then you've also got to then look at the requirements of taking the money back out. So again, it's not just like you can write a check to yourself. Oh gosh, I'm sounding old. It's not like you can do an EFT to yourself to cover that deposit. You've got to get the time frame right. And you've actually got to apply to the ATO to say, I want to withdraw an amount of money under the First Home Saver Super Scheme. And you've got to you can't pay the deposit yourself and then take the money out. You've got to actually do it within the right time frame.
Yep.
So if you mess any of one of those things up, then the money is stuck in the superannuation fund. You can't get it out under the First Home Saver Super Scheme, and then the whole thing falls over. So it comes back to that simplicity versus complexity. Yes, you can do it, but you've really got to manage it. You've really got to know and have the time and the wherewithal to manage that process in order to be able to benefit from that particular strategy. Just because a strategy can be done doesn't mean that it should be done.
Yeah, 100%. And what a great note to finish on. That should be the takeaway message always, that just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it or should do it. But as usual, we've had so much fun that we've run out of time. Just to let you know that, again, Tracey will be presenting on our SMSF Trustee Empowerment Day, which we're co-hosting with the SMSF Association. We're visiting in person in Sydney and in Melbourne. And if you would like to find out more about the event, and of course, we'd love you to register for the event, please reference the details that you are seeing on your screen now. And of course, as I said right at the start in episode 1, the whole topic of how to get your money out of super actually came from feedback from last year's Trustee Empowerment Day. So if you want to hear a little bit more about this in more detail and potentially, obviously, have the ability to ask questions of Tracey as to your own situation, that would be a perfect forum for you to do that.
100%, Darin. Just let me add to that. One of my most favourite parts about the Trustee Empowerment Day is just the chats that I'm able to have with delegates during the breaks. So I'll be there for all of the breaks during the day, and the questions that I was asked last year, and just the interaction that we're able to have, and the guidance we're able to give about what can be done, not whether you should do it, but what can be done. Certainly one of the highlights for me as well. So I'm really looking forward to interacting and spending time with the delegates this year.
Yeah, we absolutely love it. It also gives us a great insight into what are some of the issues concerning the trustees out there. We can have our own views about things, but obviously we live, eat and breathe this stuff. And sometimes that can actually make us more focused on an area that we think is important, but perhaps not so important to the trustees. So it's an education process for us too. So I would encourage as many of you to come along and register for the event. Other than that, I'd just like to thank Tracey Bessers again for joining me on this podcast, and also to Superfund Property Valuations for their continued support of these podcasts as well. Thank you also to you for your company and for joining us. And as I always do, the shout out is, if you are enjoying our content on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Other than that, thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us again for the next episode of the Trusted Trustee podcast. See you then.
Thank you, Darin. See you for episode 4.